Great to be here, Stephen. Great to be here in many respects.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a story. I mean, it's quite a story. Everybody's unique, but my story is quite unique as well. I mean, basically it kind of kicked off 3 years ago when I was 56. I've always been a very keen cyclist, and over the last 15 years, I've moved into triathlon and trained really a lot. Was quite good in, for sport geeks, was quite good in my age category on, medium length triathlons and so on. And so basically I was this really fit, trained guy. I ate what I thought was a cool diet, a good diet. We did follow the carbohydrate mantra. If you want to train hard, you should carb up. That was just, endurance athletes. That's what we're led to believe. I enjoyed a drink every now and again, but in terms of body fat issues, I've always had like a real, less than 10% body fat, completely lean, mean fighting machine in that respect. And then I came to a local event in August 2018. And yes, it was a hot day, and yes, it was quite a tough event, running, cycling. It was a duathlon event. And literally 300 meters before the finish line, I collapsed with a sudden heart attack, with a Widowmaker, with cardiac arrest, whatever you want to call it. And I was saved, obviously. I survived by, luckily, two of my fellow competitors, about 70 runners on the day. Two of my fellow competitors were actually doctors, and they just finished the event, and they heard what had happened. They ran back and they started the whole CPR procedure. We could go into that a little bit later, but they started the CPR procedure. The ambulance came. Long story short, took me to hospital, defibrillated me, took me to hospital, and I woke up 10 days later out of an induced coma, with my wife on one side, my sister on the other, and they both had the biggest smiles I'd ever seen, mainly because they honestly did not know if and when I would wake up. And when I wake up, and the next thing is when I wake up, what kind of mental state I'd be in. Because that's the next risk. You can maybe survive the heart attack, but there's a big risk of brain damage from not having blood supply there. So that was 2018, and I was under sort of cardiac management. One of the things about being fit and everything was I recovered quite quickly. Got out of hospital quite quickly, and started to build myself up again. After 3 months, I went to visit my wonderful cardiologist, and he's a wonderful guy, and I love him. He saved my life on that day, no question. And my wife came with me because obviously she's very much emotionally involved in this whole story. And we sat there. I think I'd done an ergometer test, and he's like, "Oh, Mr. Felstead, everything's looking, I think you're doing quite well. Recovery's going well." And my wife had a sort of list of questions. "Oh, Dr. Crisp, I want to ask you a few things. How sports always been very important to Mark. Should he give up now? How should how much exercise should he do?" "Oh no, sport's very good for the heart. You should continue doing sport. Obviously not to the level you're at before, the training amount you were doing before." And then she'd, "But what about diet? What should he eat? What should he not eat? What should he avoid? Is it meat? Is it nuts? Is it olive oil? You hear so much." Forget it. Mr. Felstead, you're under management now. Keep taking those pills, and we'll see you again in 6 months, right? And this was exactly the scenario. And we both walked out of there, and we looked at each other and said, "No, that can't be right. There must be more I can do than just this whole, take a box of," at that point, I was probably taking 5 pills a day. "There must be more I can do than just taking these box of medications and, sit back on the sofa and wait for the next one," effectively. And so I started down this journey of, what was I doing wrong? Why me? What was I doing wrong? How can I improve? What can I improve? To be honest, I started down the road of vegetarianism for a year. Someone gave me a book that said, "Oh, Mark, the China study, it's heart disease is very much linked to meat consumption, this, that, and the other." So I actually gave up meat, became virtually vegan for a year. But I can tell you, Stephen, my blood values just dropped. They were just like all over the show after that. I'm not saying this to everybody, but for me personally, it was doing me physically no good at all. And I could see this in, talking to my doctors. I could see that my, various blood values were just not off, were getting worse. And so that's when I started then. I think it was like March 2019 or something. Now then I started doing the whole, back to the YouTube, Dr. Google, and I came across Ivor Cummins, so I'm sure you're familiar with as well, right? And he started talking, I was listening to his YouTubes, and he started talking about all these things I hadn't heard about, metabolic illness and, insulin resistance. how come none of my doctors are talking to me about this? You know, they were just, oh, Mr. Felstead, you're unlucky, but blah, blah, 1 in 1,000, blah, blah, blah. And so I started following Ivor, and then he mentioned the Widowmaker, then he mentioned Extra Time Movie. And Steve, if you don't mind me telling you, it's a little bit emotional, but
of course, Mark, yeah.
I still remember very much that Sunday afternoon where I was doing the, you know, the Google research or the YouTube research with my iPad, and then I found the Widowmaker and I started watching it, and I honestly cried for 40 minutes, literally was crying. And my wife was going, what's going on, Mom? What on earth are you watching? I'm like, man, this is my story. Because I don't know if you know the Widowmaker, but it starts with an emergency call with a woman who say, my husband has dropped dead. What the hell do I do? And I'm like, this is my story. This, you know, it was, thank God, it, you know, my wife got the call from the hospital, which she'll never forget either. But, you know, this is my story, you know, sudden heart attack. So then I watched the Extra Time Movie, and then basically I sort of started to align myself with Ivor and, you know, Eat Rich, Live Long. And then I started to try and contact him, reach out to him. And I often say this jokingly, stalk him effectively. And anyway, we eventually sort of formed a sort of a relationship. And then I said to him, Ivor, hey, man, you're talking to all these, you know, professors, Nobel Prize winners, doctors from all around the world. And here's me, Billy No Mates. I always like to say Billy No Mates, but I've been through all those procedures. Everything that those guys are talking about, I've been at, you know, the other end of the needle, you know, the other end of the knife. I know what it's like to be on the CAT lab, and, you know, or to wake up in the emergency clinic and have all those, you know, I've been through all that. And now I want to, you know, help others. First of all, myself, also help others, you know, try and learn from what I've learned or what you're offering, so that we can avoid that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally, Mark. Yeah.
And
like for you, it was even a bigger thing because you were a guy that was fit and active and slim. So why should this happen to you? It's usually the guys that are smoking, or the guys that have the beer belly, or the guys that aren't active, and that made it more.
Exactly. And it's funny, Stephen, because in that same session with the cardiologist, then the normal procedure is that after a heart attack, you'll go to what's, you know, heart rehab or cardio rehab. And he looked at me, and my wife was sat next to me, and she's young and gorgeous. I mean, you know, she's quite young and gorgeous. Anyway, and he looked at me and he said, Mr. Felstead, I don't know that you're going to enjoy going to cardio rehab. You know, you're a fit guy. Most people there, you know, 60, 70, they're learning how not to smoke. They're learning how to eat some kind of healthy diet, and they're learning how to use an ergometer for the first time. And to be honest, most of them are quite glad to get away from home for 3 weeks. And he said, and looking at you now, I don't think you're in that position. No, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to go and spend 3 weeks away from my family, especially after what we've all just been through. So that whole, you know, I've always said I'm not your typical cardio patient in many respects.
No.
But that is the lesson to be learned, you know, because I'm also not alone. I mean, there are lots of guys and women who I think I'm doing the right thing. I'm pretty fit. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm pretty fit. Nothing wrong with me. And then bam, you just don't know.
That's the killing part for me. And I think it's the critical thing is that we're all kind of on the wrong track, and we don't realize that there's just something really big waiting to happen. And like the reason I became aware, quite like yourself, it didn't happen to me, but my father had heart disease early on in his life. Thankfully, he's still alive. But I came across Ivor as well. And I was like you, going on vegan diets and just trying to, you know, improve my life, because I was touching 40 and I wanted to, you know, be around for a long time to come. But then I started, like you explained only minutes ago, you know, getting all this information, and my mind started changing. I went back on the meat and all sorts of, you know, things like that. And I just think it's just purely outrageous that we're all like on the wrong track, from the health services, from the government, from everything like that. And then, you know, friends of ours, and in your case yourself, I know a friend of mine only 3 weeks ago, he got a massive heart attack. His heart stopped. He knows he's one of the lucky ones because, like you, they brought him back. But I just find myself, I can't sit down and let it happen anymore. I have to put myself maybe outside my comfort zone to a point and enlighten people, especially my friends, especially because I'm getting to the age, I'm not 20 or 30 anymore. I'm 40, maybe touching 50. this is what's going to be happening over the next couple of years, and I've got to tell these people and explain.
Actually, the one of the cardiologists said to me, it's there is the kind of a male menopause, which is the sort of the mid-40s, 50s, mid-50s, which is where this whole kind of calcification, these problems first arise, often arise where there've been no indications before. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but they just don't know. Cardiologists just do not fully understand the process of calcification. I'm not saying I do either, or anybody does, but it's a mystery. And even one of the very best cardiologists said to me, we don't know, Mark, for 2 years it can burn. And then for the next 3 years, nothing can happen. It just stabilizes, and then it will come again, and then it will just, disappear. They just don't. Nobody knows. So, but yeah, I mean, back to the story a little bit is, like I say, I teamed up with Ivan, and then I suggested to him, hey, how about forming some kind of collaboration? You with your really smart guys, and me from the patient side of thing. And he was like, oh, that's something I've always wanted to do, actually, is, talk to more on the patient side. And it was, whether it was syncopation or serendipity, the universe, whatever. But I arrived in his world sort of the right sort of time, because that's something he was looking to do. Yeah. And then I came along and said, hey, why don't you do with me? And I talked to him about the goals and the aims of what, I was doing with We Love Our Heart. And he goes, Mark, as long as it's, legal and ethical, I think it's a great idea. Let me know what I can do to support you. And that was like 18 months ago. We officially started We Love Our Heart like a year ago. When Ivor put me on one of his podcasts, he actually invited me then on these podcasts to talk about how I'd improved using low carb, high fat, and how my blood values had never been so good and I never felt so good. And that was the birth of We Love Our Heart. And since then, has gone from strength to strength. And just so your viewers know, we've got a live conference on April the 9th, and we have pulled together, Ivor mostly, and myself, some incredible speakers now. And this is, I'm just so proud and so overwhelmed about how good it has developed over the last year. And like you say, it's all about being able to spread the word for, don't think you're not at risk. I mean, you mentioned TOFI, for example, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. We worked together with Graham Phillips he's a diabetes coach, and he said to me straight to my face, he said, Mark, being thin is no guarantee of being healthy. It's exactly right. This vision of, I'm sporty, I'm thin, I'm fit. I don't need to worry about that. It's just no guarantee.
It kind of is my understanding that the mainstream population really are under that spell that, if you're thin, if you're fit, if you can get on a bike and cycle, you're fine. There's no problem, which is just so far from the truth. And it's something that if me and you having this chat and your website, maybe we can encourage people to visit your website, even take part in the seminar you're having. Brilliant. I think it's good for the community, for the people further afield, to get this understanding that it can happen to anyone so quick, and there's steps that can be taken to fix the problem as well, which we might go into briefly.
Simple stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, Stefan, I'm no expert, and we don't give medical advice.
Likewise,
I talk to a lot of experts, but I don't tell anybody what to do. I just tell them what I have learned, and maybe this is going to work for you. And like you say, there's a whole, we're up against a massive misinformation about what you should eat, what is healthy and whatnot. But don't really want to go down there right now, because it does start to sound a bit conspiratorial, you know what I mean? But absolutely, also just being an endurance athlete, being a keen cyclist and triathlete, everybody was always like, hey, if you want to do on a hard training ride or do well in competition, you need to carb load, you need to up your carbs a couple of days and all this. And it's just not healthy. And Ivor, bless him, God bless him, the first time we talked, he said to me, I explained my story to him and this carb loading and the rest of it. And he said, Mark, you're like running a Formula One engine, you're high intensive interval training. I've always been a bit too crazy about the training, push. Yeah. He said, you're pushing your body to like 7,000, 8,000 RPM. You're eating lots of carbs and sugar, which means basically it's like a high octane fuel. So you're driving your body like a Formula One car. The difference is that the Formula One car, they're only meant to last, the 42 laps or whatever it is of a Grand Prix, and they break. And so that's what's happened to you. You were pushing your body so hard, your pipes are going to break.
Yeah. And like it's possible, and I've never asked this question or heard any of the guys like Ivor Cummins and the doctors we all listen to on YouTube say this, but it's possible that some of our younger athletes that carb load and taking so many carbs before matches and before, they could be unknowingly doing damage to their heart, which comes back to them, like say when they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s. I'm not saying that's
I mean there's been a couple of occasions recently of like heart attacks amongst young athletes, like Christian Sorensen, I think in the European Cup was a big
Christian
one.
Ericsson,
sorry. Yesterday was someone called Colbrelli, or what's his first name? Professional cyclist, came second in a sprint, collapsed after 100 meters later and was defibrillated.
Yeah.
And then
it's just becoming so more common, isn't it? And I know that there can be other reasons for that, which we don't want to go into on this podcast.
There are some electrical reasons,
yeah. But I have a few things written down here, Mark, because I know
please far away.
You don't have that much time, so I'm just going to
it's all good. It's all good.
Just briefly, I know you said about it there, but just how it affected everyone in your family and for that 10 days, because I just want to get through to people. It's grand saying you're not interested and you want the money and you want the life and you want the house and the car, but if you're not alive to enjoy these things, it's no good. Like, what's the sense to any of everything we have?
God, Stephen, that is exactly the point, and that's a tough one. And I always say this: I was out, man. I was gone. I suffered no pain in that respect. The pain from my heart attack was my wife, was my daughter, was my family. They were like completely devastated. And if I just mention that evening, because I mean I do get a bit emotional about it, because that's the one thing that really hurts. It was a lovely evening in August. I'd gone out with my bike, I'd kissed my wife and my daughter goodbye and was really excited about taking part in this competition. None of us knew that was very nearly the last time we were going to see each other. And it got to like 9 o'clock. I mean, it was only a local, it's like 10 kilometers away from my home. So it was a local thing. And it got to like 9 o'clock, 9:30. It was getting dark. And Steffi, my wife, was thinking, oh, Mark's probably having a drink or, talking to his buddies at this event. And then at 10 o'clock, she got a call from the hospital. Your husband has just been, he's in the emergency room. He's had a heart attack. And their exact words were we cannot say if he'll survive the next 24 hours. He's stable at the moment, but we cannot say if he'll survive the next 24 hours, and we suggest you get over here straight away. And can you imagine what that is from, how that must hit, someone you love or whatever. So I always,
sudden, and it's so out of the blue,
and I've always been known as, Mark the sporty guy. I used to have a big network in the event business, and there'd be, you could fill a room with 100 people and you say, okay, which is the guy who you think is going to have a heart attack? And everyone, well, not him. He's the sporty guy. No way. He's, and there it was. Nobody expected. It was like a bombshell to everybody. I was the last person in the world they expected to have a heart attack, myself included. But
Ivor Cummins did a great interview with Dr. Paddy Barrett. He's a big cardiac doctor in Ireland. I think he works in one of the big Dublin hospitals, and he mentions in the podcast, and I just found it so profound. He says something along the lines of the first time someone realizes they're having symptoms of a heart attack, in fact, is they're dead, because sometimes there are no signs or symptoms. It's just lights out. And with respect to everybody and anyone that has lost someone, but that's just how it is. And it's so profound, and it's just off.
Okay, Steve, well, let me just pick that up, because interesting enough, because of the conference we're doing on April the 9th, I actually, the guy who resuscitated me, the two doctors, Dr. Ralph Heinrich and Philippe Lefebvre, I've been in touch with them ever since. Obviously, and with Ralph is actually a holistic doctor, so I've actually been his patient as well. And I asked him to take part in this conference, which he'd love to do, but he's on holiday for that day. So we did last week. We did a recording so he could, be part of the conference. And I went somewhere I haven't been before, so it's interesting that we're talking today. I sat next to him and I said, Ralph, can you now please tell me how it actually was? What is your recollection? Because I have no recollection. I've lost 2 days completely, no recollection. So how actually was it? And And it was pretty moving for both of us, pretty scary. Because the truth of the story is, Stephen, I don't know if you're ready for this, but they resuscitated me for 25 minutes, 25 minutes CPR. And that's quite a long time.
Yeah.
2 doctors doing it. So they're doing it properly, breaking ribs and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And they also both looked at each other and knew that after 10 minutes, the chance of me not having brain damage was going to be really, really tiny. After 15 minutes, they looked at each other. No, we keep going.
Yeah.
And they kept going. And then he looked at me like last week and he said, Mark, you don't know how lucky you were with your escape.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, you know, like you say, the first time many people realize it's too late, 35%, the statistics say 35% will survive their first, will die from their first heart attack. Only 6% will survive their first Widowmaker, like I had.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely right.
No, that's huge. And I think just the fact of you explaining that, it might encourage people to just look at themselves, because I'm quite the same as you. If I was in a room, everyone's saying, well, there's the fit guy there. But yeah, my father had, I think it's left anterior descending. I think it is the Widowmaker artery. That's the one LAD, he had blocked. He had it at 50. So like, I'm no different to anyone else. I might be slimmer, I might be thinner, but I have the makeup and I have the history. So it's coming on my door, and I need to. That's why I've got a big interest in it as well.
Cool. I mean, we're big promoters. I think it's not quite the word, but we talk about risk management, and one of the best ways to establish risk at an early point is with the CCC scan, the calcification scan. That gives you a number, and you know, you can pretty much see where you are with that number on the scale from 0 to 1,000, or we've had people with like 3,000. But so that establishes your first risk. And it was also Ivor who said to me, very clever, stuck with me. There's no such thing as a sudden heart attack if you'd have known where to look 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3, or you know what I mean. There are things you can look at in your blood values, your ratios, that might be indicating, flagging up you've got an issue before it gets to the heart attack.
Yeah. That's good, Mark, because basically, like, it'd be great if we could give people that may get the chance to watch this video tips on what's the best thing to do, where do we start, what area do we start exploring. And I think the CCC scan is a huge one, because basically it, if I'm right, it measures the amounts of calcified plaque in the arteries of the heart, and it gives a measurement which can you know, show you how blocked the arteries are, and how close or how much of a possibility you are to having a heart attack. So like, I know it's becoming maybe more common, but a lot of people still don't know about it. And I think like everybody should know about it, and we should be encouraged at a certain age, maybe 30, whatever it is, 40 in males to 50, 60, to have this CCC scan, which is a calcium scan of your heart. And I know there's different little areas popping up all over Europe, all over the world, all over Ireland, that can do this scan. And it's not very invasive, and these guys are promoting it, like Ivor Cummins, like Malcolm Kendrick, all these doctors and guys that know all about it are promoting it.
There is, I don't want to get again conspiratorial, but there is a fundamental reason why it's not so popular, is because it doesn't earn many doctors so much money as other invasive or non-invasive tests, because I think on the business side of things, what they're often doing is sending you, Stefan, you're my patient, and I'm sending you down the road to the radiographer. Well, then that's not coming, you know, the money's not coming to me. So I would rather have you sit on an ergometer, take your blood pressure, look at your cholesterol levels. You know what I mean? And then, you know, keep you, there are various different reasons, but the cardiology industry tends not to support CCC scans as such, because it's not where the money is. But you know, again, that's not, maybe I don't want to sound conspiratorial. That's just a fact of life.
I understand, Mark, totally. And like, to push that point further, I think a lot of the good work and great work our doctors do, a lot of it is not prevention. It's dealing with the problem, as in put in the stent and do the bypass, or when the incident happens. But this is a form of scan, like in, say, a scan for cancer. It can show up early. It gives people a chance to, take evasive action.
And on that point, Stefan, I'd like to say, we talk about this with the group that I lead last week. The CAC score is not a death sentence. It's just the starting point. It shows you the history. It doesn't matter where you are on that scale. It's just a flag to say, oh, maybe I better start doing something now.
Right.
It does not mean, oh my God.
Yeah.
I've
heard Ivor Cummins speak about the CAC scan, and like people have had scan results, maybe say in the thousands, which is very, very poor scan. You're very blocked. But if you take the action, if you eat the right foods, if you take the right directions, you can change the,
you can manage it.
Score.
You can manage it. You can stabilize it.
Right.
And in some cases, you can even reduce it. Yeah, and this is what we also do with We Love Our Heart, is to encourage people to take those measures.
Mark, I'll push on, just conscious of time again.
It's all right.
Just, you went to YouTube and you found different people. Can you give us an idea of people you follow or people that inspired you to become more interested and helped you along the way?
Well, it's basically, I hate to be honest, I've been swimming in Ivor's slipstream. Graham Phillips, Donald Collins, Malcolm McKendrick, Johnny Bowden, Scott Murray. These are all people that, funnily enough, I've also created a podcast, and I've all interviewed these people as well to talk about my story and to take their advice as well. So we're very much in that sphere. Professor Tim Noakes and what's his name? Gabor Idrosi.
Yeah, he's great. I find it very difficult to understand not his accent, but the concepts he sometimes talks about, because they're.
I know he's very intellectual in the whole. Yeah. So those are the guys we follow, and what has become apparent is that we're all trying to search our own whodunit, right? We know that everybody is different, and we know there are, nobody can say there is a cure for heart disease because it's too individual and too myriad. But all we can do is, tick little boxes, take little steps that we know are doing positive help. Yeah. And that's what, that's the route we try to go down. What are the risks that I can manage, given the pack of cards I've been dealt with, if you like?
Yeah. I'd just like to give a shout out to these guys, because they're doing fabulous work, and their work doesn't go unnoticed. They get thousands and thousands of views on their YouTube channels, and I think it's amazing they're taking the time out to do these, interviews and discussions.
Dr. Thomas Levy in the States is one I have to mention as well. I was introduced to him, and we spent an hour together, and I couldn't speak for 2 hours afterwards, because some of his ideas were like, not crazy, but just like, wow. Yeah. Never heard of that, but it just, wow, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, there's so much inspiration that can be gained from lectures and YouTube videos, such as the ones that are being put out. Mark, if there was one thing you could say to someone out there maybe watching the video, of the first step to take on the road to just maybe checking themselves out. I know a lot of men sometimes are maybe a bit shy in when they become sick, or they want to leave it on the long finger. What would be the first thing? Would it be get your bloods checked? Would it be change your diet? Would it be the CAC scan? What would be your first tip? Or
absolutely, get your bloods checked, yes, but don't. There are I can produce to anybody a list of things that we like people to get tested. It's not just the standard list that most GPs ask for. There are some other things there that we're much more interested in being able to give an indication of if there's an issue there. Get a CAC scan, but that is also a question of money and insurance. The thing about the CAC scans is it's widely different depending where you live, how much it costs, the availability. Do you need a doctor's prescription to do it? And some doctors won't even offer it to you. You know what I mean? That's the thing. So yes, get some bloods, but get specific ones. Get a CAC scan. The other thing I'd recommend, and a little bit out there as well, is get yourself a constant glucose monitor for a couple of weeks. Look at, just wear it. Keep a food diary, and look at how you're eating and what you're eating and what it's doing to your blood spikes or sugar spikes. because that is a real visual evidence of what's going on inside your body, and that can also indicate if something's not quite right. So, and to be honest, you can certainly in most of Europe, you can apply to something like Abbott or one of the the big diabetes companies, and for €60 get your own CGM, constant glucose monitor, and just wear it for a couple of weeks, and just look at what's happening inside your own blood, and it can also, and that can start to say, oh, that spike shouldn't be that high, or for example, like a typical one I was mentioning is not, oh, sourdough bread, oh yeah, very healthy, very healthy. There's a little boutique shop that sells only organically created sourdough. There's a queue of people lining up every day for this sourdough bread because they're healthy. I took one piece of sourdough and my spike was off the scale.
Yeah.
It's just like, maybe that's just me, but it just gives you this visual feedback of, oh, what I'm eating actually is playing around quite a bit with my blood sugar, which in turn leads to your insulin, which in turn leads to damage of your arteries, which in turn leads to, formation of plaque and all these other things.
Yeah, like
so those as you've touched on there, those would be the three things, like check your bloods, but not just any. Get from me a list of the 5 things you should be checking and the ratios you should be looking for. If you can afford it, if you've got access to a CAC scan, get a CAC scan. And the third thing is just try out a CGM, a constant glucose monitor, for a couple of weeks. Keep a food diary and see what foods are actually having spiking on you, having a real effect.
Yeah, because sometimes we think we've gone for a 5K run or a 10K run. We've done the work. Let's go home and start filling ourselves with the sugar, the sweets, the cereals, the bread, the pasta, and it's just, we can't cover everything today, but it's just shooting up that insulin, and insulin is the biggest problem with all of us in all around the world.
In my mind, Stephen, if I may say, it's, for me, insulin's like sandpaper on the inside of your arteries. The more insulin you've got, it's rubbing against all the inside of your arteries and scratching them. And then what happens is that, the cholesterol, your body's natural defense, comes and tries to cover it up. And I think it's Malcolm Kendrick in his book, The Clot Thickens, which is a brilliant book, by the way. And he said it's a bit like, I don't know where you are in Ireland, but it's a bit like that country road that you drive down every day and then you keep hitting a pothole. Well, having a pothole's fine as long as the council comes and fill it up. But if they don't, and if they become more potholes and they become deeper, the council can't keep up. Yeah. And it's exactly the same if you imagine with your coronary arteries. Your body's doing the best to patch up the damage that's been caused by insulin, sugar, whatever. But obviously, if the damage is too big, they can't keep up, and that plaque just builds and builds.
Yeah, totally agree, Mark. And basically, what foods, I suppose, low carb foods like your meat, your eggs, low or high protein, low carb.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, and again, it's not the same for everybody, but personally, I've moved very much towards the carnivore area. So it's meat and eggs, and some above the ground vegetables. But just like you, I guess, I live in a part of Germany that is famous for its potato growing. So at the meal table with the in-laws, I can't be a diva and say, "Oh, no potatoes, please," because they'll just look at me like, what's wrong with this guy? Yeah. We're not inviting him back.
Yeah.
You've got to be human about the whole thing.
Yeah. Mark, that's been excellent. I'm going to let you go, and I really appreciate your time. It's been good. Just remind us again where we can find your website.
Okay, so weloveourheart.com. So www.weloveourheart.com is the simple one. I'll send you the link to the registration for the conference on April the 9th. If anybody is very interested in, or should be interested in that. I mean, we've got the likes of Malcolm Kendrick, Professor Tim Noakes, Scott Murray, William Davis, the super gut and wheat belly. All these guys are taking part. Thomas Levy, I mentioned there, many others. So it's going to be a really exciting day. So I'll send you the link so you can share that. And otherwise, Steve, it's been great talking to you.
Cool. Please, those guys, I love listening to them, and I'm already converted onto that side, so it's just a joy. So I'll definitely sign up, Mark. And thanks for your time.
You're welcome, Stephen.